So we've talked a little bit about JavaScript. We've talked a little bit about some different types of HTML elements. And now I want to talk about CSS. CSS stands for Cascading Style Sheets. Cascading style sheets are a style sheet language used to describe the presentation of a document written in HTML or XML. So when you go onto the internet and you go to a web page, say you go to ESPN.com, and you see all these colors, you see the different designs, you see the different size fonts and texts, the different styles of fonts. This is all CSS. That is cascading style sheets. Now, setting CSS properties to specific values is the core function of the CSS language. A property and value pair is called a declaration, and any CSS engine calculates which declarations to apply to every single element of the page in order to appropriately lay out and style it. Now, if style sheets could only apply a declaration to every element of the page, it would be pretty useless. The real goal is to apply different declarations to different parts of the document. And so for this, we have what are called CSS rule sets. An example of a CSS rule set would be something like div, and then in this declaration block, giving some CSS properties, which is basically setting our rules here. So background, blue, and border white. These would be two different CSS properties that we've given our element of div, which would apply this to every single div on the page. Now, that's kind of a broad selector. So say we wanted to target a div with the class of test. So we have a HTML element on our page with the class of test. Div.test. Now this brings in another concept of CSS called specificity. If we had two different rule sets, say our other rule set is still here, and we have background black for this one, and color or border blue. These are different CSS rules. It's a completely different, separate rule set, but it's targeting two of the same things because it's targeting a div, but this one's targeting a div with a class of test. Now, CSS specificity is the means by which browsers decide which CSS property values are the most relevant to an element and therefore will be applied. Specificity is based on the matching rules, which are composed of different sorts of CSS selectors. And due to specificity, the styles that would get applied to our div of test would be this. Even though it's also going to fall under these rules since it's a div, this CSS selector is more specific. You make your CSS declarations within your rule sets.
I do declare.
You don't have to keep saying I do declare. Anytime you say something, it means you're declaring.
Well, actually, in CSS, you do have to declare stuff.
That is the way Southern people talk.
And what designing woman are you basing that on?
Delta Buck, I do declare.
Shut the f up, Michael. As you can see, you follow up CSS declarations with a semicolon. The semicolon separates these two declarations here. The final semicolon is not necessary, but it's good practice. Whenever I'm writing CSS, I always follow every single CSS declaration with a semicolon. When linking your style sheet to your HTML page, you use the link tag. It doesn't have a closing tag, just has the opening link tag. Rel equals style sheet, href equals your path, style.css, since we're in the same directory as our index, it's just going to be style.css. Media equals screen is not required. That's a little intro to CSS. I'm going to get a little bit deeper into it in a future video, but this is just some introductory syntax type stuff with CSS.